Hello, my friend, and welcome to the study. Today, I thought we could look at the Battle of Trafalgar that happened off the southwest coast of Spain on the 21st of October, 1805, between the fleet of the Royal Navy of Great Britain and the combined French and Spanish fleet of Napoleon Bonaparte. There will be lots of book and paper sounds, as well as watercolour painting, a bit of pen drawing, and a little bit of tapping. We'll look at the ships and the commanders. We'll go through the engagement as it was written up almost a century later in this section of the history of the Royal Navy. We'll read Admiral Collingwood's dispatch in the London Gazette. And we will paint a diagram of the engagement from this line of battle illustration, and name each ship. So there will be some soft whispered reading to help you relax, sleep, or study. So get comfortable and let's put out to sea in 1805. Let's look at some of the history of the warships of the Royal Navy. This is a diagram of a third-rate warship, and the decks, the hold, the orlop, and the gun decks. All of the rigging and the masts, the mainmast, the foremast, the mizzen, the bowsprit, with all the parts and complement of crew of this third-rate warship. This particular warship is a 17th century warship from 1690, and this design was still relevant 100 years later. Here you can see a cross-section of some of the gun decks and the gun ports, and a ship being built in dry dock. That's the Cambridge dockyard. this way, this line going that way. So square-rigged ships, in order to do battle, would pass each other and fire. Your main aim in firing at an enemy ship was to take out its mast and rigging, rendering it unable to maneuver, thereby making it capable of boarding and taking it as a prize. Here's another line of battle. The Battle of the Nile. The French ships moored in line, firing, and the British ships coming in line. Two parallel lines going aside. And here you have the points of sail of a square-rigged ship. And if you've seen any of my points of sail videos, you'll notice that the square-rigged ship cannot point as far into the wind as the modern yacht or dinghy. And here each point is equal to about 1/32 of a compass point, or compass circumference, going down to the running before the wind, with the sails exactly 90 degrees to the wind, meaning maneuverability in a battle or engagement was paramount, and understanding your ship's behavior and the direction of the wind was more or less what would win the battle, in addition to well-practiced gunnery. If the wind is coming from that direction, you want to have the weather gauge, meaning you want to be to windward of your enemy, because that way you're more maneuverable. And here we have the rating system of the ships of the Royal Navy. 6th rate, and these are smaller ones, so tender ships. 5th rate, 4th rate, 3rd rate, 2nd rate, and 1st rate. The 6 rates into which the warships were classified were based on the number of guns that were carried, although virtually every navy of the period later used the rating system. It was introduced in Britain by Admiral Lord Anson during his first years as Lord of the Admiralty, an office he held from 1744 to 1762. First-rate ships were those that carried 100 and later 110 guns or more on 3 decks. First-rate ships generally carried a crew of 850 or more men. Second-rate ships carried 84 to 100 guns, also on 3 decks, and generally had a crew of 750 men, while third rates had 70 to 84 guns, with a crew of 500 to 720 men. Fourth rate carried 50 to 70 guns, on one deck. They had a crew of about 215 to possibly 295 men. 6th-rate ships, if commanded by post captain, meaning a captain who was in permanent service, would carry 20 to 32 guns, with a complement of 120 to 195 men. And here is the breakdown of the rates, the rating of the ships, number of guns before 1810 and was increased after 1810, number of decks and crew. This is a note on ship construction, and you can see the cross sections of the hull. So they were made to carry very heavy guns and to be very fast. There are some shipbuilding tools, and here we have the labeling the masts and yards of a sailing warship. You can see the mast is here, and then here we have a topmast, and then a royal, and these are the yards from which the sails hang down. So we also have stays, and there's your bowsprit, and the jib boom out there. So the actual part of the bowsprit and mast that is directly attached to the ship is much shorter than the topmasts and royals that are fixed, and these could be taken down during storms or to repair or replace. And here we have the standing rigging, the rigging that does not get changed during sailing, not very much anyway. All labeled: shrouds, stays, backstays, preventer stays. And there are some ships with their sails out, and one at anchor with a tender there. And these are how the sailors, the foremast jacks, used to trim the sails, set the sails. There was a rope here called the horse, and they would stand on it, and it took however many men hanging from this yard arm to pull a sail in, to trim it. And here are all the sails of a sailing warship. So we have our main, our mizzen, and foremast. So going from the mainmast, and there's our mainmast there, and the sails are named after those masts. So we have a main sail. Or main course. And if you wanted to put a sail out to the side of the ship to get more wind, it's called a studding sail. Here's a studding sail. Can't be seen exactly because we're looking at the side of the ship, because because it's attached to the yard of the mainmast, we call it a main studding sail. Or lower main studding sail. On the topmast is the topsail or main topsail, and we have a main topmast studding sail out to the side. Our gallant or royals, we've got a main top gallant sail and then the two to the side. Our main top gallant studding sails, and at the very top, the top gallant royal or main top gallant royal, the top, and each would be named after the masts of the mizzen and the fore, and the studding sails out to the side of the fore and main mast. We have on the bowsprit the spritsail and sprit topsail. So every inch of canvas could be spread to increase speed. And here is an 1805 action. And you can see the sails have holes in them where they've been hit by cannon fire. And a little quote here. Every ship of the Royal Navy included among its complement a sailmaker as one of the essential members of the crew, along with men such as the boatswain, carpenter, and gunner. More sails. And here we have a little bit about the Victory. This is a photograph of the Victory. In the historic dockyards in Portsmouth. She still sits there today in permanent dry dock, the oldest ship still in service. But all of her topmasts have been taken down, and only the stumps of the mainmasts are there. And you can go and visit her, and go on board, and see the very place where Nelson gave his commands, where he fell, and where he was taken below and passed away. There's Nelson there. And the 26 line of battleships that were captured, thanks to him, between 1793 and 1801. Here we have some cross-sections of hull construction and how it improved over the years, how the keel became differently shaped for speed and stability. And these are the decks of the warship. This one has 3 gun decks. The bow, the hold, the orlop deck, and then we have the lower gun deck, the middle gun deck, and the quarter deck. On top the forecastle or forecastle, and these carronades or small guns. This is the head where the men would do their ablutions there. The stern and the stern cabin officers. And the poop, coming from the Latin pupis, meaning stern deck. And there's a painting of what a gun deck looks like. And the parts of a 32-pound cannon. 32-pound being the size of the cannonball which would be fired from this gun. The Battle of Trafalgar gave us Britain's most revered war hero of all time, Admiral Lord Nelson, and a solidarity of resolve in the British Empire during the War of the Third Coalition. In 1805, France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, newly declared emperor, controlled most of the European continent, but the British Royal Navy controlled the seas, imposing blockades that kept supplies from France and the continent of Europe in an attempt to thwart the threat of a French invasion. Since the Peace of Amiens, Britain had been alone in this struggle against Bonaparte, but in 1804, events led to the formation of the Third Coalition, comprising Britain, the Holy Roman Empire, Sweden, Russia, Naples, and the Kingdom of Sicily, joining against Bonaparte's domination of Europe. Napoleon would win several victories, including Austerlitz, spurring his resolve to invade Britain. He knew that this would require the defeat of the Royal Navy and control of the English Channel. Bonaparte's main French fleet consisted of ships in the Atlantic, off the port of Brest, and in the Mediterranean, in the port of Toulon, as well as his client state of Spain, whose fleet was in Cadiz. Napoleon planned to amass the combined French and Spanish fleets in the Caribbean, whence they would sail to Brest, and then make a bid for control of the English Channel. By 1805, Vice-Admiral Nelson commanded the Mediterranean British fleet blockading Toulon, when Nelson's fleet was blown off station in a storm. Admiral Villeneuve, commander of the French fleet in Toulon, evaded the blockade and sailed through the Strait of Gibraltar, meeting with the Spanish fleet at Cadiz. He then sailed for the West Indies. Nelson's fleet, after taking time to find the elusive French fleet, finally sailed in pursuit across the Atlantic and back again. The Atlantic chase meant that both fleets were then low on stores. Returning across the Atlantic, Villeneuve faced the British of Cape Finisterre and took his fleet south to Cadiz to take refuge, where he joined with the Spanish commander of the fleet, Federico Gravina, on his flagship Príncipe de Asturias. Admiral Nelson had 27 ships of the line under his command. HMS Victory was his flagship, its captain being Thomas Masterman Hardy. It was one of 3 first rates with 100 guns. Also in the fleet were 4 second rates with 98 guns and 20 third rates. The combined French and Spanish fleet was commanded by Vice-Admiral Villeneuve on his flagship Beaucentaur, as well as 33 ships of the line, which included some of the largest ships in the world, Spanish had 4 first rates. 3 of these had 130 guns: Santísima Trinidad, Príncipe de Asturias, and Santa Ana. The battle commenced on the 21st of October, when Nelson spotted the fleet to his east. The wind was in the west-northwest, and the French and Spanish had formed one long crescent-shaped line heading in a northerly direction. Nelson had planned to attack in 2 separate columns. At 11:45, he sent out his famous signal, "England expects that every man will do his duty." At 12 o'clock, the battle opened. The leading column to windward was commanded by Nelson in the Victory, and Collingwood led the leeward column in the Royal Sovereign. As these columns approached from the west at a right angle to the combined French and Spanish fleet, Nelson abruptly turned to engage the line. Collingwood as well turned towards Nelson very slightly, causing a converging of these 2 lines right at the French and Spanish ships. Everything moved very slowly because the wind at the time was slight. The ships Victory and Royal Sovereign engaged first. At the center of the French and Spanish line, where the command vessels were, Royal Sovereign was the fastest of the British fleet. She sailed ahead and came under fire from Vougeot and Indomitable and Santa Ana, and fired broadsides. The second ship in Collingwood's lee column was the Belle-Ile. She engaged L'Aigle, Achille, Neptune, and Francheux. After heavy fighting, she was completely dismasted. Victory, Admiral Nelson's ship, came under fire from Eros, Santísima Trinidad, and Redoutable, as well as Neptune. Victory's wheel was shot away, and the tiller had to be manned below decks. At 12:45, Victory had penetrated the line between Villeneuve's Beau-Centaure and Redoutable. Beau-Centaure and Victory engaged in devastating broadsides, and the ships in the leeward column, Temeraire, Conqueror, and HMS Neptune, were then left to engage the Beau-Centaure. Victory was engaged in a devastating battle with Redoutable, their masts locked. Musket fire was rife from both ships. One of the muskets fired from the mizzen-top of Redoutable struck Nelson through the spine under his left shoulder, a wound that resulted in his death. At 5 minutes to 2, Redoutable was isolated and overwhelmed. Beau-Centaure and Santísima Trinidad all surrendered after 3 hours of fighting. As the British lines advanced, the ships in the rear began to engage, and the enemy was gradually defeated. The British captured 22 vessels of the French and Spanish combined fleet. Redoutable. Spanish ships that were taken included Argonauta, Bahama, Monarca, Neptuno, San Agustin, San Ildefonso, San Juan Nepomuceno, and Santissima Trinidad, as well as Santa Ana. So a lot of the large ships were left to be taken as prizes. Several sank, including the Redoutable and Santissima Trinidad. Also, the Argonauta was scuttled. Achille exploded, and burned down were the San Agustin and Intrépide. A storm had come up just a few hours into the battle, making things extremely difficult for the damaged vessels and for the British vessels towing prizes. Among the prize vessels that were wrecked in the storm were L'Aigle, Berwick, Rougeau, and Monarque. British lost no vessels, and there were still a few of the combined fleet that had not engaged and made a run for Cadiz. During and after the storm, there were different orders facilitating the chase of these vessels. 11 of those managed to escape to Cadiz, but only 5 remained seaworthy. When the wind had shifted to west-southwest, the sea became very heavy. Many of the British prizes broke or dropped their tow ropes, and Collingwood, now in command after Nelson's death, made a defensive line approaching the French and Spanish squadron, trying to cover the last prizes before they stood out to sea to weather the storm. The French and Spanish fleet suffered enormous amount of casualties, despite Collingwood having dispatched vessels to pick up survivors and to protect the prizes. British losses were at a minimum, and British victory was due in no small part to Horatio Lord Nelson's planning of approaching this long line in 2 columns, but also superior gunnery that was practiced on the British ships. The victory over these very large ships in the Spanish fleet was an accolade to the Royal Navy. In this book, we also find this diagram. This is the combined French and Spanish fleet heading north off the southwest coast of Spain towards Brest. And these are Nelson's 2 columns, the wind coming from this direction. Each ship is named, and this is how the engagement or the battle was joined. This shows some of the signals, 5 flags that were given between ships during the Napoleonic era. So in a signal book, so that a commander could signal his fleet on maneuvers. And this is a page from the Admiralty's signal book for ships of war, published in 1799. Each flag indicates a point of the compass. Everything aboard ships of this period was influenced by the direction and strength of the wind, and each ship's ability to take the best advantage of that. Holding the weather gauge during a battle was considered of great advantage. The admiral's job was to position his fleet and then to commit his ships to battle, to give them the maximum prospect of success. Let's read October 6th, 1805, dispatches of which the following are copies, were received at the Admiralty this day at 1 o'clock a.m. from Vice-Admiral Collingwood, Commander-in-Chief of His Majesty's ships, vessels of Cadiz. Euryalus off Cape Trafalgar, October 22nd, 1805. Sir, the ever-to-be lamented death of Vice-Admiral Lord Viscount Nelson, who, in the late conflict with the enemy, fell in the hour of victory, leaves to me the duty of informing my lords commissioners of the Admiralty that on the 19th instant it was communicated to the Commander-in-Chief from the ships watching the motions of the enemy in Cadiz that the combined fleet had put to sea. As they failed with light winds westerly, his lordship concluded their destination was the Mediterranean, and immediately made all sail for the strait, with the British squadron consisting of 27 ships, 3 of them 64s, where his lordship was informed by Captain Blackwood, whose vigilance in watching and giving notice of the enemy's movements has been highly meritorious, that they had not yet passed the straits. On Monday the 21st instant, at daylight, when Cape Trafalgar bore east by south about 7 leagues, the enemy was discovered 6 or 7 miles to the eastward. The wind about west and very light. The Commander-in-Chief immediately made the signal for the fleet to bear up in 2 columns, as they are formed in order of sailing, a mode of attack his lordship had previously directed to avoid the inconvenience and delay in forming a line of battle in the usual manner. The enemy's line consisted of 33 ships, of which 18 were French and 15 Spanish, commanded in chief by Admiral Villeneuve, the Spaniards under the direction of Gavrina wore with their heads to the northward and formed their line of battle with great closeness and correctness. But as the mode of attack was unusual, so the structure of their line was new. It formed a crescent, convexing to leeward, so that, in leading down to their center, I had both their van and rear abaft the beam before the fire opened. So to wear ship, if the ship is going, the wind is coming this way, tacking would be going through the wind with the bow. But to wear ship takes longer, is easier on the rigging, turning all the way around. So they were heading east in warship to form a crescent-shaped line, of which Nelson took advantage. I had both their van and rear abaft the beam, and before the fire opened, every alternate ship was about a cable's length to windward of her second ahead of stern, forming a kind of double line, and appeared, where on their beam, to leave a very little interval between, and this without crowding their ships. So they've got very close in line. Admiral Villeneuve was in the bosun tour in the center, and the Prince of Asturias bore Gravina's flag in the rear. That's here. Prince de Asturias. But the French and Spanish ships were mixed without any apparent regard National Squadron. As the mode of our attack had been previously determined on and communicated to the flag officers and captains, few signals were necessary, and none were made, except to direct close order as the lines bore down. The Commander-in-Chief in the Victory led the weather column, so the one towards the wind, and the Royal Sovereign, just there, which bore my flag, the lee or leeward column. The action began at 12 o'clock by the leading ships of the columns breaking through the enemy line, the Commander-in-Chief about the 10th ship from the van, the second in command about the 12th from the rear, leaving the van of the enemy unoccupied, the succeeding ships breaking through in all parts astern of their leaders and engaging the enemy at the muzzles of their guns. The conflict was severe. The enemy's ships were fought with a gallantry highly honorable to their officers, but the attack on them was irresistible, and it pleased the Almighty Disposer of all events to grant His Majesty's arms a complete and glorious victory. About 3 p.m., many of the enemy's ships, having struck their colours, their line gave way. Admiral Gravina, with 10 ships joining their frigates to leeward, stood towards Cadiz. The 5 headmost ships in their van tacked, and standing to the southward, to windward of the British line, were engaged, and the sternmost of them taken. The others went off, leaving to His Majesty's squadron 19 ships of the line, of which 2 are first-rates, the Santissima Trinidad and the Santa Ana, with 3 flag officers, including Admiral Villeneuve, the Commander-in-Chief, Don Ignacio Maria Dalvilla, Vice-Admiral, and the Spanish Rear Admiral, Don Balthazar Hidalgo Cisneros. After such a victory, it may appear unnecessary to enter into encomiums on the particular parts taken by several commanders. The conclusion says more on the subject than I have language to express. The spirit which animated all was the same, when all exert themselves zealously in their country's service. All deserve that their high merits should stand recorded, and never was high merit more conspicuous than in the battle I have described. The Achille, a French 74, after having foundered by some mismanagement of the Frenchmen, took fire and blew up. 200 of her men were saved by the tenders. A circumstance occurred during the action which so strongly marks the invincible spirit of British seamen when engaging the enemies of their country that I cannot resist the pleasure I have in making it known to their lordships. The Temeraire was boarded by accident or design by a French ship on one side and a Spaniard on the other. The contest was vigorous, but in the end the combined ensigns were torn from the poop and the British hoisted in their places. Such a battle could not be fought without sustaining a great loss of men. I have not only to lament in common with the British Navy and the British nation in the fall of the Commander-in-Chief, the loss of a hero whose name will be immortal and his memory ever dear to his country, but my heart is rent with the most poignant grief for the death of a friend, to whom by many years' intimacy and perfect knowledge of the virtues of his mind, which inspired ideas superior to the common race of men, I was bound by the strongest ties of affection. a grief to which even the glorious occasion in which he fell does not bring the consolation which perhaps it ought. His lordship received a musket ball in his left breast about the middle of the action, and sent an officer to me immediately with his last farewell, and soon after expired. I have also to lament the loss of those excellent officers, Captain Duff of the Mars and Cook of the Bellerophon. I have yet heard of none others. I fear the numbers that have fallen will be found very great when the returns come to me, but it having blown a gale of wind ever since the action, I have not yet had it in my power to collect any reports from the ships. The Royal Sovereign having lost her masts, except the tottering foremast, I called the Euryalus to me, while the action continued, with ship line within hail. Made my signals. A service captain Blackwood performed with great attention. After the action I shifted my flag to her, that I might more easily communicate my orders to and collect the ships, and towed the Royal Sovereign out to seaward. The whole fleet were now in a very perilous situation, many dismasted, all shattered in 13-fathom water off the shoals of Trafalgar, and when I made the signal to prepare to anchor, few of the ships had an anchor to let go, their cables being shot. But the same good providence which aided us through such a day preserved us in the night, by the wind shifting a few points, and drifting the ships off the land, except 4 of the captured dismasted ships, which are now at anchor off Trafalgar, and I hope will ride safe until the gales are over. Having thus detailed the proceedings of the fleet on this occasion, I beg to congratulate their lordships on this victory, which I hope will add a ray to the glory of His Majesty's crown, and be attended with public benefit to our country. I am, etc., etc., C. Collingwood. And here we have the order in which the ships of the British squadron attached to the command fleet on the 21st of October. The van, we have the Victory, the Temeraire, Neptune, Conqueror, Leviathan, Ajax, Orion, Agamemnon, Minotaur, Spartacus, Britannia, Africa, Euryalus, Sirius, Phoebe, Naiad, Pickle the schooner, and Entreprenant, a cutter. In the rear, or the lee column, we have the Royal Sovereign, Mars, Belest, Tonnant, Bellerophon, Colossus, Achille, Polyphemus, Revenge, Swift Sure, Defense, Thunderer, Defiance, Prince, and Dreadnought. There follow some general orders from Collingwood. So now you see how the engagement was joined in this diagram. Let's make our own diagram with watercolors. Now that the background is dry, I'm going to use this little brush to paint the ships. So we have some grey blue. I'm going to use intrépide, formidable, and 1, 2, 3, we've got the Cornelie, right over there. More water there. It's supposed to look like sails. Okay. 1, 2, 3, and then we have the Degré Durand and Mont Blanc. Those will be underneath the rubble. Mont Blanc. It's very crowded in our battle line here. Then we have the Eros. And we have the Beau-Centaure and the Neptune. Right here, next to, we'll put the Beau-Centaure there. And the Neptune there. Indomitable near the San Juan here. There we go, that's looking a little bit more like sails. Then we have Franchelieu and the Pluton. Next, the Argonaut. And over here, Themis. And Hermione, Hermione. That's all we have room for in the French and Spanish line. Let's do the British. So I'm going to make a very darker color. Oh, first let's paint the French in a nice French navy blue that we can mix up here. There we are. Our French hulls are blue. Okay. Mix up a nice grey here for these sails. And we'll do, first we've got up here Africa and Argus. And we have our two lines converging, two battle lines, the windward and leeward lines. So next to the Beau-Centaure and Santissima Trinidad, Minotaur. The ones in the back didn't join the battle till later because our wind was very light. And don't forget, between them we have Naiad. And right here, Redoubtable. And let's do Collingwood's line. Royal Sovereign. There. Belle-Île. Mars. Donut. Need some more colour here. Okay. With the donut. Okay. I love this. It looks like a lot of ships in the fog. Bellerophon. Colossus. Attire. Swiftsure. Revenge. Defiance. Fitting the whole fleet on the page here. And thunder and defense. I'm going to paint the British fleet. The hulls red. So this one's going on a little bit drier, which makes a nice little contrast. Except, oh, look at that, we forgot the dreadnought. To put the dreadnought on there. Dreadnought's a bit wet. There we are. So I've got the Defiance, the Thunder, the Prince, and the Dreadnought. Okay. And there we have our fleet. The two lines converging as Nelson turned and Collingwood turned, and the combined allied fleet of France and Spain. Let's make a compass rose in dark blue. So we have, let's see, north, not Napoleon, and our weather gauge, our wind is north-northwest. There's our compass point, and the wind coming across like this. So, wind the ships. So we have Collingwood's Royal Sovereign, and we have Admiral Nelson's Victory. We also have Sirius and Euryalus. Up here, Africa, and here, Argos. Belial and Mars. Tonnant. Phoebe. Bellerophon. Colossus. Achille or Achilles. Polyphemus. Let's see. Temeraire. Realize some of these are perhaps or had been captured in previous battles and are now being used by the British. Conqueror. Should go through and do the sails as well. And the mast sticking up. I think that would be great. Do the mast. Yeah. And there's our Phoebe, Leviathan. Good names. Britannia. Ajax. Orion. Agamemnon. Minotaur. Pickle. What a funny little name, Pickle. But it made a name for itself, certainly. I think we've got the Naiad here somewhere. We're missing Naiad. Dreadnought. Let's see, we better start from here. What are we missing? Polyphemus, Swiftsure. The holes there. The yards. Yard arms there. And Swiftsure, Revenge. Defiance. The Prince Dread. losses. There we have the British fleet. Alright, let's do the Allied fleet here. This one is a very crowded fleet. Let's try and get them all. So, Spanish. Argonauta. Prince of Asturias. Yeah. Masts on the Spanish. Two masts there. San Ildefonso. And Achille. I think that one might be French. So I've got to get the blue paint out. Give it a lick of blue. There we are. Hermione. Themis. Okay. More Spanish. Captured the Berk. Argonauta we have. And Mont. Marien, that's this one. Marien. But we have San Juan. These are very long names. I'm just going to say San Juan there. Don't have enough room to write it all. And Algeciras. This one, the Aigle. And Pluton. And this one, after the Pluton, we have Bonjoyeux. Bonjoyeux, we have Santa Ana. And next to Pluton, again, Montmartre. We'll do the French one here. Got a few crowded in. So this one, Indomitable, and Santana there. San Yuso, what's this one? Euston, and above it, San Leandro. Oh, very long names. Josephine de Beauharnais, Saint Augustine. Oh, it's getting very crowded. Corneille. There. Another Neptune. Neptuno. Scipion and Intrépide. So yeah. Don't forget this one. It's going to be the Rayo Mont Blanc. This one, Dreytour, and the giant other Leviathan there, the San Francisco Days Out. I have enough room for these names here. I'm gonna ship, and Santissima Trinidad, the big one. We're missing labels on a few here. Oh, we've got the Scipion, Intrépide, and we are missing the Saint Augustine. And there are our ships for the Battle of Trafalgar. And we have our flagship, the Victory, the Royal Sovereign, Posento, Santissima Trinidad. So these Admiralty ships in command towards the center. Thank you for spending time with me in the study and looking at the Battle of Trafalgar. It's been fun, and I hope that you've enjoyed the sounds. I wish you a very, very relaxing afternoon, evening, night, a night of beautiful dreams, and a very pleasant morning when you awake. Be good to yourself, be kind to others.